Hi there. Welcome to the Hotflash Inc. podcast. Today's guest is Bonnie Wisener. She's a registered holistic nutritionist, digestive health expert, and founder of Shift Nutrition and Wellness. Bonnie created the Shift Your Gut therapy method. It's a 12-week program that's helped people around the world finally get to the bottom of chronic gut issues like bloating, constipation, gas, and heartburn. Bonnie's all about cutting through the confusion, addressing the root cause, and creating real, lasting change. She's also after my own heart by incorporating nervous system regulation right into the bones of her approach. If your gut's been trying to tell you something, this is the conversation you've been waiting for. I hope you enjoy it. I'm Ann Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hotflash Inc.
You're all woman to me. All right, Ann Marie.
I want to give a huge shout out to Phosis. Phosis is a beautiful skincare company started by Susan Campbell. Susan is a very cool person. She has really cool curly hair. She's a beekeeper. She's a mom. And she created the skincare that she couldn't find when she was in perimenopause. Phosis as a company is obsessed with repairing, restoring, and replenishing your dry, sensitive, hormonal skin. It's exceptionally clean and clinically proven. I've tried it. It's just absolutely beautiful skincare. So thank you to Susan for stepping up and supporting the first Hotflash Inc. Summit. And if you're in the market for clean, beautiful skincare, you can use code Hotflash Inc. to get 15% at phosis.com. Okay, Bonnie, it's so nice to meet you. I've circled your work. I'm so excited to talk to you about the gut. This is, I feel like, central to the perimenopause conversation, and it doesn't get a lot of play or a lot of informed play. So I'm just going to start off by saying, why, from your perspective, does the incidence of digestive upset increase at this time?
Wow. Okay. This is one of my favorite topics as it relates to digestion and, of course, being a menopaused aged woman. And actually, most of the women I work with are also in this category. So it's one of my favorite topics. And you raise the primary answer would be the crossover or intersection between nervous system dysregulation and how important a role nervous system regulation plays in digestive function. That's the simple answer. But the slightly longer answer is that perimenopause and menopause issues, they're not actually separate problems happening at the same time. They're very intricately related, and they're different expressions, I think, of kind of the same underlying system shifts, right? Because hormones obviously are the regulators throughout our entire body, right? When they fluctuate, the gut, the nervous system, even obviously our metabolism, all get kind of affected in different ways, but due to the same root cause, if that makes sense. So I think that's why the same foundational strategies that I use for digestive support, or that I recommend often for digestive support, even without chronic digestive issues, actually also help attenuate some symptoms of menopause.
Do you think, so the nervous system regulation, do you think these issues, or have you seen that these issues are here before, but maybe people are coping with them, but then when the hormonal fluctuation starts, it's sort of exposing it rather than you develop those problems?
It depends. There's two answers to that. Irritable bowel syndrome can also obviously be diagnosed a little later in life. No one is suggesting that you're necessarily born with it. So I think it does evolve. The answer to your question is yes, right? If you think about, I'm not sure what your experience was like during menstruating years, but if you think about it, so many women, even adjacent to their actual period dates, have diarrhea or constipation or bloating, excessive bloating, right? So the hormonal fluctuations have always sort of played a role throughout our life. I just think it becomes, to your point, a little bit more spotlighted and more evident and more prominent in an everyday sense because the nervous system is now highly involved.
It's so crazy because I had IBS starting in my early journalism career, and I now can correlate it very much to the stress that I had at that time. But whenever I would think to mention it to my doctor, he'd just be like, "Oh, there's nothing we can do." And it wasn't until I got over here and started meeting functional doctors, and someone said to me, IBS isn't even anything. It's not even a diagnosis. It's not really anything. It's just a cluster of symptoms. Has it progressed anyway since then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm in Canada, and I would venture to say that unfortunately, it hasn't progressed to the point where, for example, general practitioners like family doctors have the tool set available to help clients or patients the way that I do, because the approach to medicine conventionally is so different. It's progressed, though, from a scientifically valid perspective in the sense that, number one, there are diagnostic criteria available for diagnosing it, which I think most doctors should be aware of. And the second thing is that there has been pretty much consensus over the fact that now we recognize IBS as a disorder of the gut-brain interaction.
Okay.
So that's, I think, a big swing in the right direction.
It's so crazy, like, that it took till now to realize that the gut and the brain are so connected. So your approach, when you see women, what do you, obviously you've got this whole a 12-week program, but what is the crux of it?
The crux of it, I mean, in my view, I'm just going to take a step back.
Sure.
People specifically with IBS, as you know, personally, and also just as you know, watching what's out there, anybody listening to this who has IBS has at some point struggled with the question. And I think this goes for if these digestive issues appear in menopause too. If something's affecting your gut, your bowel movements, having you running to the bathroom, having you not being able to go to the bathroom, the first thing we think about is food, right? So there's so much unfortunate and unnecessary restriction and acrobatics around trying to figure out what to eat and even when to eat. Like, I'm not going to eat because I'm going to be in public in a social setting. It's exhausting. And for people who are really chronic about this, like it's affecting their day-to-day life, it's depressing, to be honest, right? It's really upsetting and obstructive to like everyday life, like going to weddings. I had a client last year or the year before who spent almost the entire of her son's wedding in the bathroom. I know not everyone experiences that way, but I'm just saying that to demonstrate a point. So what I do that I think helps women come out of that cycle, even something as obviously recognized as a therapeutic food approach like the low FODMAP diet, like approaching food from a low fermentation perspective. I just want to, I'll address that and then address how my approach is different.
Okay.
I should say I never, ever recommend the low FODMAP diet, even for clients who have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And the reason for that is because it's not actually a solution. It is a symptom relief mechanism, and it does allow your body to sort of repair itself or recover from that kind of circumstance. But the actual root, in my opinion, of that is the dysfunction to begin with, right? Even if it's physiological, and it's not usually, but by physiological, I mean, even if resources like enzymes, digestive enzymes, aren't timed in an accurate way and blah, blah, blah. What I do is, it is, I guess, functional in approach. I'm a holistic nutritionist. Certainly, there's a lot of attention paid to the food side, but on my end of things, it's rather about food dietary enhancement, which all of us could benefit from, versus dietary restriction, which I don't know one person that's actually long-term resolved IBS through dietary restriction. Symptom abatement, perhaps short-term, but it always returns, right? So it's not really a long-term solution anyways. And furthermore, there's evidence to suggest that all of this elimination, particularly in the FODMAP sense, because it's abused usually for too extensive a period of time, is detrimental long-term to our gut microbiome and to the functioning of our digestive process.
I was just going to hop in and say, that when I was experiencing the worst, that was when the dairy thing came in and don't eat dairy. And I removed dairy. And then I heard later that actually it's not good to do that, to remove a food group, because you can sort of like remove your ability to digest it.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure about that. It's possible for some people. My view on that, and when I say this about my approach of not being restrictive, I still have a lot of respect for the clients I work with who are restrictive. In fact, there's women who are in my program right now who I will say to them, food fear becomes very real. Right. I'm actually working with a male client outside of the group as well, who's in this category. It's for foods. Right. And so to tell somebody about dietary enhancement before they've had a chance to actually improve function is terrifying, and it's not going to go well, right? So all I'm saying is I understand the food piece of it to be a long-term enhancement process. We know factually how much fiber our body needs for our gut bacteria, if you want to get into the weeds, to really be progressively functioning. But taking all that aside, where we have more success is actually in daily habits and in tactics that support digestion. I'll give you the simplest example. Well, one of the simple examples. Many people who feel bloated all the time feel very overwhelmed having a big meal at a time. Right? Fair to say, like if you're bloated all the time, you feel gross, like you don't want to sit down and have a huge meal. That's understandable. The problem is the solution, because we still need our calories and energy, we still need food to exist, is a lot of people will unwittingly choose rather to eat little bits throughout the day, like nibble, 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 that kind of thing. That interferes with a very important digestive function called the migrating motor complex, which actually is the muscle and nerve conduction that is signaled when we start to eat specifically. So it actually, all of these processes rely on our body's natural timing, right? So that interferes. So actually having meal spacing as a strategy, even if you're having 4 smaller meals, if you can spread them out properly, is better than grazing, just as an example.
Okay. And I find in this whole space of perimenopause and all this wellness, everyone's always trying to find the one thing. So you'll hear, like, it's never one thing. It's never one thing. And I was telling you before we got in the air that I was eating Doritos in the summer when I was on my family vacation with my beautiful niece and nephew, and a hot dog, and thinking, this is crazy. My gut's great, But seed oils, people will always talk about these highly processed oils. And I do know that I can't eat very many of them. What do they play a role, or is it something that you tell people to steer clear of, or?
It's fascinating. So I don't particularly use seed oils in my cooking.
Yeah.
And I do suggest other oils for people and other quality and grades of oils. But I have to say, I pride myself on sort of straddling the progressive and holistic approach. I'll say progressive because that's what it is. And also the conventional science-based approach of things. So I would say a conventional, like registered dietitian will tell you the science is not out on this. Seed oils are fine, right?
Yes.
I don't buy that either. I don't think that's true. And I think we don't have enough studies to prove everything is fine. Clearly, for example, highly processed foods, we're now seeing, 30 years after holistic voices started talking about them, may be shockingly the root cause of like a lot of chronic disease, etc. So it's a great question, and I don't know the fundamental, true final answer, but I proceed with caution around them. And that's a great example because I would say, like you mentioned, dairy, even low FODMAPs. The thing is, the goal for somebody who's trying to resolve these digestive concerns, whether it's just minimal and something that's showing up in perimenopause or menopause, you can feel the shift, you feel the bloated feeling, maybe your bowel movements are changing. Ultimately, this does affect your weight. People never consider this in relation to, and all of us, I think almost everyone who I know who goes through perimenopause and ultimately menopause, when you're in menopause, has definitely experienced some sort of fluctuation in body shape or feeling or weight itself. So the gut is really the key to managing a lot of these things. And I know I come from a skewed perspective in the sense that this is what I do every day, but I don't think, going to your point about there isn't just one thing, right? Going on a diet, like a calorie restricted diet, for example, I think that's becoming a little outdated, but let's just use that as an example. To lose weight, why is it so temporary? Like, why then when we start eating like a little bit more, a little differently, or not on a weight loss cycle, why does our weight climb up 99% of the time? There has to be a reason. One of the reasons is the integrity of your gut function or your gut bacterial environment.
Okay, so in your program, you work with nervous system regulation. Are people resistant to that
Yeah,
concept?
a little bit. I mean, the reality is that unfortunately or fortunately, I love it, but a lot of the people who land on my desk have been through the rigmarole, right? So I won't call them desperate. They're certainly not desperate, but they're at very close to the end of their rope very often. So they are more open to trying different things. But I know what you're asking me. And I even sometimes feel this way when I'm talking about gut directed hypnotherapy with people. You feel a bit woo, right? Like a bit here somewhere. But the reality is that gut directed hypnotherapy specifically is around since the 80s, first of all. Second of all, in Canada, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole with this, but my personality is such that when I discovered gut directed hypnotherapy about 3 or 4 years ago only, I went down a rabbit hole. And Ann Marie, I checked every institution in Canada, universities, associations of psychotherapists, the gamut. And I have to say, I can say publicly, I didn't find one practitioner in Canada. Whereas in the United States, specifically where I discovered this at the University of Michigan, they have gut-directed hypnotherapists, or sometimes they're called gut psychologists, right, on staff within their GI units, which is, and I'm not saying every hospital has this, certainly not, but that's how I discovered it. So it's very, for anybody listening to this who has that reaction that I think we all have a little bit, which is like somewhere out here. I don't know if I can like get there.
Yeah.
First of all, to experience it is an amazing process, and it does help. It just is a layer of help. So I discovered Nerva, which I'm sure you're familiar with because they're also, Mindset Health also does EVIA. So they're wonderful. First of all, the organization is brilliant, and I have no affiliation with them other than respect. But I do incorporate that into my program for people who I think could benefit from it. So they have a practitioner certification program that I've done. It's just a screening program. I believe in this so much as a layer of support that there were times over the last few years I thought maybe I should go back and study that. But I'm going to be 62, and I, thank God, got hold of my senses. You know, but because that's me. But what you said earlier, again, even when it comes to gut-directed hypnotherapy, even a company like Nerva, a service like Nerva, will acknowledge that there are, and this is why I like them as an organization so much, that it's not just one thing, right? It's other supports in layers. So it's meal timing, it's making sure to, and when we talk about nervous system regulation and the woo factor, nervous system regulation in this context, you don't even have to go as far as gut-directed hypnotherapy. It looks like taking 5 deep breaths before you sit down to eat a meal, so that your nervous system is in parasympathetic mode at the most important time.
Right.
I mean, that's simplifying it, but it really is helpful. It looks like chewing your food to mush, which most of us do not do, so that you're helping a vulnerable system by giving it what it needs to do without too much work, and helping instigate the secretion of all of the supports like enzymes and stomach acid and bile. Like our body does these things intuitively if we support it properly. So the layering, I love that you mentioned that in particular, because again, where the intersection is, I feel like there's a lot of noise out there, even about menopause support, even just in the realm of HRT, and then also all the lifestyle stuff, that if somebody picks one thing, I don't know that they're likely to have a lot of success, right? But if you are guided towards, let's say, a handful or less of things that work for you, and this is where the tracking part comes in. Like I might have, I'm rounding up like 20 different tools available, like types of things that my clients can do But obviously, I don't expect them to leave the process needing to do those 20 things. They wouldn't be able to live their everyday life.
Yeah.
So at the end of it all, you should be able, with tracking, with observation, with hopefully professional guidance, to discern which of these things is helping you the most. Because unfortunately, for things like digestive dysfunction, IBS, it's not the same as disease. So we don't have like an MRI type of tool to discern exactly what the problem is.
That is so interesting. I think, too, when you're going through this, having been through this myself like a couple of years ago when things just blew up, and looking back on it, I do feel like I was being called to heal the like unhealthy coping mechanisms and chronic stress that I lived in. So although like I had SIBO and then healed it with a functional doctor and did a liquid diet for 2 weeks and felt great. But then 6 months later, leaky gut, Hashimoto's, like it was like blew up, right? But I did Nerva for 3 months and I did all these nutraceuticals. I ate this certain way. I had a homeopathy. And I always felt that the biggest piece was Nerva. Like I always felt, because it's just for people who don't know, it's hypnotherapy, but also daily education that really gets you believing in the connection between your brain and your gut, which I think people still kind of don't get, like I think it's just kind of hard to understand.
Yes. And to your point, first of all, I love hearing that feedback about your process. One of the things, again, this shouldn't be an ad for Nerva, but it almost could be. It's not, though. But one of the things I really loved about Nerva, because I did find ultimately a gut-directed hypnotherapist who was Canadian originally, but who lives in Mexico, and she was wonderful. But somebody who practices that way, all of us, listen to how I'm talking about things, our perspective unknowingly becomes skewed. Right? So you sort of disregard some of the other things. Nerva, it's true. Alongside the gut-directed hypnotherapy, you get emails that reinforce all of the good habits. And again, it's picking and choosing and trying and testing and monitoring, right? Some of these things. But overall, and I would say this is true for anything somebody's trying to do, even to resolve other menopause-related symptoms, consistency is key. Right? And people, I think in both spaces or overlapping in these spaces, women, all of us, because we're busy, it's no one's fault. But it's human nature. What we tend to do is we do something, like I'll ask someone to do something they're not wild about. And they will absolutely try it, but they're not wild about it. So in 3 or 4 days, if they don't see a change, because we're all like this, it's confirmation bias. It's like a scientific phenomenon, right? We kind of like see things the way we want them to be sometimes. So as arduous as it sometimes is, you need to give something at least a good period of time for it to work. And that's why Nerva's program is 6 weeks plus the maintenance, right? For up to a year. That's why my program, I hate to call my stuff programs, but the process is usually demanding of 12 weeks at least, or 3 months. Sometimes it takes 6 months. Sometimes it takes 6 weeks. So all of these factors, for the people listening to this discussion, I think the takeaway should be that, first of all, if somebody is a woman struggling with newer digestive issues in menopause, pay attention to it. And I think it's wise to address that almost first because of the reasons we said earlier in the podcast, right? Like in our discussion. But in addition to that, don't look for a silver bullet, because like with IBS, there actually isn't one, There isn't a silver bullet, but it is resolvable. Like you are much more entrenched in conversations and the space specifically about menopause related issues. You've spoken to so many experts on this topic. You're an expert on this topic. You probably see the same thing, right? Like you can't just expect to sort of dip into something and everything's going to be changed. Another reason for that, I think, is our body, being homeostatic, needs time to adjust. Like it's a remarkable tool that will be responsive to pattern. Yeah. And that's true with digestion as well, in terms of improvement.
Well, I've been saying only recently have I I've been saying I think the most important thing you can do in perimenopause and menopause is nervous system regulation ahead of everything else. I think if you can't do that, then if you can't do it, then that's an issue. And I've talked to women who are really suffering and they're talking about upping their hormone therapy dose. And I'm like, look, if you just took 15 minutes a day, I'm telling you from the other side of menopause, I need to do this for myself. When I do it, it's very subtle, but it works. And when I don't do it, it's very subtle, but it doesn't work. And then it's not subtle. I just get greeted with disbelief. Like, it's like, I don't think people believe that nervous system regulation could be that powerful.
I think it's partly because, thank God, we're so adaptive that we don't even always recognize the amount of stress that we're under.
Yeah.
And furthermore, you've been to Toronto, like driving in Toronto traffic could aggravate your nervous system, but you're not sitting there thinking like, well, sometimes you are actually, but often it's just your everyday commute. You're not thinking like, but your nervous system is literally. So there's that. And I also think that in addition, though, I agree with you that nervous system regulation, especially for people with irritable bowel syndrome, especially for women in this stage of life, perimenopause and menopause, because of hormone fluctuations, which we addressed earlier, the decrease or fluctuation in estrogen, from how I understand it, literally increases cortisol, right? That's just like physiologically what happens. So if you compound that with not managing stress, right? And stress starts up here. It's how you perceive what's going on around you. It's how I think our nervous system takes our cue from our breath pattern, right? Well, not I think, it does take its cue from our breath pattern. So I agree that's a super powerful tool that overlaps these categories. The other two, though, that I think are important and relate to this is blood sugar management, because if you can regulate your blood sugar, and we know that insulin resistance also increases during menopause, and also insulin resistance decreases, if our gut microbiome shifts as well. So again, another overlap. Super important because blood sugar spikes also cause cortisol to spike. Our system becomes stressed, physiologically stressed. Super important. And I think, I think blood sugar is probably the second most important factor here as far as digestion is concerned. And sorry, I'm going on and on, but I'm so passionate about this. The other thing is that the two overlaps also, another overlap also rather is for IBS, people with IBS, dietary restriction becomes really like the go-to, right? So there's a lot of restriction. I would venture to say that because of weight gain and our concerns sociologically around that and everything else, and a lack of knowledge, sometimes a lack of time, I think that's also where a lot of women go to try and manage weight, right? They restrict. And the reality is that both of these circumstances or whatever require enhancement. Dietary fiber helps with blood sugar. It helps substantially with gut biotic diversity, which helps with digestion and hormone clearance. So it's just a fascinating intersection. That's why I was so excited to talk to you.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that when it comes to some of these discussions, it requires time, right? People need to have the time to absorb some of these ideas because they're not quick fixes, number one. And they're like you said, the nervous system regulation piece we're not always in touch with, right? I mean, a lot of us don't even want to admit that we're stressed because there's so much honor in North American society anyways of being like the busy bee, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't even touch on the psychological aspects of going through menopause and how your life changes and how that identity shift even could be stressful, adding stress.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. And the intersection of everything. I mean, you've got relationship issues, probably. If you have any, that's when they're going to emerge. And, God forbid you have an aging parent that you're trying to deal with nearby or far away, or, I mean, your kids. There's so much. I'm just wondering if you add hormone therapy into a gut issue, what do you see? What do you see in the people you treat in this area?
That's sort of difficult to answer because, first of all, unfortunately, a lot of women my age specifically, I'm going to be 62, weren't offered hormone
Right.
therapy, right? In fact, were denied it, right?
Yep.
In a lot of cases, a lot of women I speak to. And some of the other women who may have had it are a lot older than I am. But I don't profess to be like super well versed as far as hormone therapy is concerned. As a holistic practitioner, I know this is going to sound, I mean, it's totally taking the pendulum all the way one way, but I genuinely do feel that dietary intervention can also be very useful here, right? Fiber is our friend as far as balancing hormones go. Even balancing cholesterol, fiber is super important. But I don't know that I've noticed a difference, or I haven't paid attention to, or really, there's not much I can say about that.
Yeah, it's
What
not
I
on your
can
radar.
say,
Okay.
it's not that it's on my radar now because it's
Yeah.
on everyone's radar now, but I'm going to start paying attention. It's a really interesting question. But one thing I have noticed, which I think might have a glimmer of relation here, is I work with a lot of people who have type 2 diabetes as well, who are on GLP-1. And that's a whole other conversation, of course. And I, again, don't profess to be an expert other than how to help people remedy some digestive upset relating to taking GLP-1. But I know that GLP-1 meds are being microdosed now for weight loss and possibly for hormone stuff. I'm not sure. So I think the future will be interesting to see in that regard. And also I think, we've talked so much about not barriers, but people's thought processes and how that might not be helping them move forward or get results in terms of symptom resolution. But the reality is, I think it's important to know it's not a hormone failure. It's just like part of life, right? It's a system transition. So I think if you look at it as a system transition, then you have to find strategies to sort of adapt. Like I once taught a course at the school I studied in on the fact that on lifestyle cycle diets, like why is our diet the same almost from like when we're a teenager till till we're much older? That doesn't make sense, right? So in relation to these changes, taking a look at fundamentally, I would say at the top of my list would be increasing fiber from a dietary management perspective for hormone fluctuations and regulation. Because we know menopause age women, perimenopause age women might get on the regular 15, 17 at the most grams of fiber a day. And just as a baseline, human adults need like somewhere between 25 and 35 grams of fiber. So we're severely undernourishing ourselves in that department. And that helps with clearance. It helps with hormone efficiency of hormone regulation, like our body to process it, estrogen in particular. So something to think about. Food for thought.
Food for thought. What about all the protein? How is that playing out for you?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Don't beat me up on this. I don't know if you have the same or different perspective. So again, I know we're learning a lot, actually, to be fair, about how much protein we need as we age. I don't know that it's only related to female hormonal fluctuations, but as we age, we do know, and this is a brilliant thing to know, same as we've known for years that calcium needs to be paid attention to as we age because of osteoporosis and bone density and all of that. I think we're learning that protein really is a macronutrient we need to pay closer attention to and maybe increase slightly, even if you're at a normal level, because it helps maintain muscle mass, strength, balance is all dependent on muscle mass, right? So less breaks, less falls as you age, all of that, great energy, blah, blah. But I do think that the conversation specifically in our circles around protein needs is extraordinary. Like I think it's extra, and I think it makes people, like nobody has time to count the way that they're asking people to count. I know that sounds negative, but what I mean by it is I think it's same as the fiber conversation. I think it starts with the fact that women especially are still under eating significantly as a weight management tool. And so protein is limited, same as all our other food is limited. And I think that even just increasing it moderately and getting a decent amount per meal, which is, I don't know, depends on your body weight, obviously, but let's say between 25 and 35 grams of protein per meal is our guideline, right? You're fine. Like you don't have to have, 160 grams of protein a day, unless you're really like in the athlete category. I don't think you need to spend too much time worrying too much or supplementing with something like collagen, which it doesn't even have like all the amino acid support. There's benefits to everything, but I just think this whole discussion about protein has been slightly exaggerated. And again, bringing it back to digestion, that concerns me because for people who have impaired digestion, and we're talking about women in this age bracket and stage of life who have impaired digestion, protein is the most difficult macronutrient for our bodies to break down, right? So, and also I worry about kidney health as well.
One thing I feel that I did in perimenopause to help myself feel better was I was grabbing like healthy food, but a lot of it was processed and supplements. If I would see you don't feel well. So you're just kind of like, oh, maybe that'll make me feel. Do you see this in your clients? People are ingesting things that are making their gut worse that are supposed to make it better.
Not when I'm working with them, for sure not. But prior to, yes. And I would say the two that spring to mind, especially that are pronounced, are people who maintain a gluten-free diet because someone told them to because of their gut. A lot of gluten-free products, including just breads, have like horrible ingredients in them, right? So once in a while, big deal. Like we're adaptable, but to have this in your diet every day could be problematic. And regarding supplements, so interestingly, a lot of gut health practitioners do include supplements sort of from the get-go. And a lot of them rely on microbiome testing, which is a really interesting area of development that I hope becomes a little more cemented, like a little more reliable, let's say. But anyway, a lot of people do. My process never, when I first started practicing about 11 years ago, every single gut protocol had 4 supplements on it. Now, I don't even recommend probiotics from the get-go. In fact, most of my clients aren't on supplements at all, except vitamin D and except things that are very specific to their needs, right? On an individualized basis, not specifically for digestion. But when people, it's again, that silver bullet theory. I once did work with a client, only once, who was convinced that a probiotic was the thing that was helping her solve her problems. And maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't. But I think that's the false sense of security that we get with supplements sometimes.
I like that, the false sense of security. So I am really interested. You don't recommend supplements at all?
No, I'm not saying I don't at all.
Okay.
It's just not a standard approach. I think it has to be individualized. So for example, for clients who are very badly constipated, like maybe going to the bathroom, twice a week at the most, magnesium bisglycinate is something that I would probably include, but something like psyllium husk fiber, which is technically a little more natural, but still a supplement to food, right, would be something that I would also include. Possibly. Yeah. And I'm not against supplements. I just don't think I think that, like I said, I think that unless they're approached intelligently, they can become a crutch.
But the probiotic, the probiotic was like the probiotic. Everyone's got to take a probiotic. What's the thinking on that that's changed?
Yeah, I'm not negative about probiotics. I personally only use a resource called ProbioChart to choose probiotics because they're random controlled trials. Probiotics are not inexpensive. Accessing services like mine is not inexpensive, right? So it like compounds. You want someone to have success.
Yeah.
And again, looking at it from a layered approach, a probiotic on its own isn't going to usually, help someone resolve their symptoms or learn about how to function better. But the other thing about probiotics in the last 10 years is they've become so sophisticated that they're very strain dependent for circumstance. So it's a lot like expensive pee if you're taking the wrong one.
Okay. So I'll just wrap up by saying if someone has boxed themselves into a corner like this poor fellow who was eating 4 foods, and a lot of people have done this, what do you have just sort of like a the lighthouse for them to,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. So for people like that, I mean, that is a more extreme example, but it's extreme, but not terribly uncommon in that space. I think that some interesting things I've noticed, and I don't mean this in a self-serving way, I literally find this fascinating. When you hand your problem off to somebody, so when you get support for it, some things fall into place right away. Like I have had clients who within a couple of weeks start to feel better. Why? Because the layer of stress involved in managing this issue on their own is actually contributing to the problem. For this particular person, I'll tell you like just exactly what we did. We started with nervous system regulation. So simple things, supporting, because I'm also trying to identify this person, what the crux of his issue is in the first like 4 weeks, right? If we can. So trying to figure out if being really diligent around nervous system regulation in his world right now, he had done Nerva before. This looks like simply deep breathing before meals, like just 5 to 10 deep breaths before meals, up to 12 minutes of real deep breathing, meditation style, almost like diaphragmatic breathing, 3 times a day, 4 minutes. What else did we do with him? Chewing his food to mush. So this guy works from home, but he doesn't usually schedule himself. He's like fairly senior. He doesn't schedule himself with like a lot of lunch break. Now he started to schedule his lunch break a little longer because it takes longer to eat.
Yeah.
In this case, this man was having completely unformed stool, just dark water in the toilet. When we started working together, I think we're around 6 or 7 weeks in, and he's now having formed bowel movement. So that's
Yes.
a huge
I'm so happy for this man.
I'm so happy for him.
Yeah.
I want to tell you one other thing that was a factor here in terms of layering, because this happens with a lot of women I work with too. A lot of men do not even know about pelvic floor physiotherapy. And that was something that I had suggested as well, based on his history and based on things he shared with me. So it's that could be something that's contributing to all of this as well, which is huge. But the interesting thing is he's still only eating those 4 foods, and we're going to start moving into, but I promised him that I wouldn't until he was mentally ready.
That shows a lot. Pelvic floor issues can be an issue in gut health. Can you just tell us about that?
It's just, again, it relates back to the vagus nerve and nerve and muscle conduction, right? I work obviously with so many women who have had a hysterectomy. When you have a hysterectomy, other than like some questions and answers about hormones and menopause, going into, immediate menopause or whatever, no one tells you that anything with your digestion could shift. But come on, you're taking something out of your body. Things fall into different places. So that sometimes is also a factor.
Oh, wow, Bonnie. This has been such a great conversation. I wish I thought to come to you. I knew about you, but I wish I thought to come to you when I was really suffering. But you sound like you're helping people, and so reasonable. It's so lovely to talk to someone. There's so much fear mongering about gut stuff. And I just love it. I think you're going to help people a lot. And I hope we speak again.
Thank you.
I'll put all the information about how to find you in the notes. Okay.
Wonderful. I look forward to it. Thank you, Ann Marie.
Hotflash Inc. was created and is hosted by Ann Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Ann Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hotflash Inc. Media.